Hey everybody, Steve Hansen here. Say what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little test actually in a bathroom. You know, we've been having a little discussion on dwell times for disinfectants. So you know, the real question is that the people that are out there doing their electrostatic spraying and fogging, is that actually wetting the surface long enough to give it the dwell time that it needs to kill the bacteria and viruses? Well, you know, there's a study that I found when I did a Google search on this, and the study claims that no, generally your disinfectant is going to dry out, air drying, before the dwell time is met. So, you know, I guess that kind of gives you or makes you think, well, are you effectively disinfecting if your disinfectant isn't staying wet on the surface for the amount of dwell time that it's supposed to in order to kill the bacteria? So it's a good question, you know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just spray try to simulate that same thing, and spray this countertop, this bathroom countertop, and time it to see how long my disinfectant stays wet on the surface. So I'm going to go ahead and spray this. This is my cleaner. I'm going to go ahead and just mist it on this countertop. I've got a bathroom countertop, and it's a Corian countertop. But I wanted to use this for an example because I didn't want to be in an area where there's a lot of air movement or sun on the surface. So that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to simulate just misting. So typically that's what the person would do, is they just mist and let it fall to the surface. Now we can physically see that it is wet. So now let me start my time watch, and let's see how long it takes that to dry. Just air dry. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the camera down on the countertop here. So, you know, this can be actual time. There, I'll just let that sit like that. You can see that you know, the sink is wet. So obviously that misting that I did, the surfaces are wet. There's no doubt about that. But for how long will they stay wet? And you know, the question is did I apply it heavier than somebody would that's doing a fogging or a spraying? Don't know. So again, you know, I think this could be an application for somebody if you're cleaning small areas, is to just use a spray bottle and then mist your areas. But for this test here, the test is just to see if a disinfectant stays wet on the surface longer than the 5 to 10 minutes that we need for a dwell time. So we're just going to let this sit, and I'll come back and check on it well, about 4 minutes, and then again at about in 9 minutes. So we have our dwell time of 5 minutes and 10 minutes long. This kind of reminds me of when we were stripping and waxing floors. And you don't have any other tasks to do, so you're sitting there watching the finish dry. I think it's, yeah, just like a painter too, you know, they have to apply some paint, and before they can put a second coat on there or whatever, they have to make sure that it's dried. So you're sitting there watching paint dry. So it appears that it's staying wet from what I can see. And like I say, you know, did I apply it heavier than they would with a sprayer or a fogger? I don't know. I think I pulled the trigger about 4 times on the spray bottle as I sprayed the countertop. And I stayed a couple of feet above the countertop, and I just tried to mist it on the surface. And if you look at when you look at the countertop, you can see that you know, that there is an even application of the solution. But I can see it's starting to dry out over here though. Well, and I think too is I can see because I didn't get this sprayed very well here, so that's why it appears that it's drying out. But the rest of this area is still wet, and we're about 3.5 minutes into it right here in this area here. So I think that's the real key there is, like I say, you can see where my application wasn't very good here in this back area, because it's actually there's no solution there at all, it looks like. So I guess that's really the key. And it's interesting because the faucet too, you know, I don't have a whole lot on the faucet. I was probably trying not to spray on the mirror, I guess. But the countertop itself, you know, this area of the counter from here to the front of the countertop is wet, and it looks like it's a pretty uniform application. Well, we're 5 minutes into it, and this here is still wet, so that's great. So apparently the amount of disinfectant that I put on the surface was enough to keep it wet for the dwell time of 5 minutes. From what it looks like, it almost does appear like it will last the 10 minutes. That would be my estimate just by looking at the surface of the countertop and how wet it is still. Definitely, I think it will last 10 minutes. This here area for sure, it looks like that area there is going to last for 10 minutes. The sink area here too is still wet, so that will probably be good for 10 minutes, because now we're at about 6 minutes 15 seconds of dwell time. Again, it's all coming down to, did I apply the same amount of solution on the surface as you would if you had a sprayer or a fogger? That's the real question. I don't know what the answer is for that. I would have to probably guess that the spray bottle is putting down more solution than you know, a spraying mist or a fogger. And now we're at about 7 minutes, so we got some more time to go here before we hit the threshold of the 10-minute dwell time. So, and I guess that's the other thing that you can keep in mind is, you know, from this test that we're doing, you're going to have other areas that are going to be, you know, in an open space where you're going to have probably more air movement. There could be sunlight. So I think those are all things to take into consideration. You know, this here is an interior bathroom, so there's no air movement in here, you know, to talk about really, and there's no window or anything, so we're not getting any sunlight in here to accelerate the dry time. So those are all the things we have to consider, you know, when we're applying the disinfectant. And now we're at 8 minutes and 20 seconds, and you know, we still have wet areas on the countertop here. It looks pretty consistent yet. Same thing with the sink. You know, the sink itself too, yeah, it still appears to be wet. Obviously, this area here is wet too. So like I say, I think most of the surface of the countertop is going to meet the dwell time of 10 minutes. We're at 9 minutes and 19 seconds. So it's going to meet that, because I can see an area, a pretty good sized area here is still wet with disinfectant on it. The sink area is still wet, and this area towards the camera, closer to the camera, is still wet too. I can see it starting to, you know, get blotchy, where you can see areas starting to dry out. Yeah, we're coming up on our 10-minute dwell time, and there's our 10 minutes. This is a 10-minute dwell time, and like I say, it still is still wet here. But it's kind of blotchy. There's areas that you can see that actually dried out. You know, the same thing with the sink. You know, if you can get an angle on it, you can see where areas of the sink had dried out, spots of it. You know, this part area right here has dried out, but it's just blotchy, you know, at the 10-minute dwell time. So is that sufficient enough? I don't know. You know, it kind of makes you wonder, if you did an ATP test to test the cells on the surface, you know, would the cleaner just being, you know, just having the cleaner on there, would that take care of it? I would probably imagine yes, it would. That it would probably kill any bacteria that was on here just for the time that it was. Even if my recommended time is 10 minutes, even though it got blotchy, I think it still would have done a good job. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let this sit. I'm curious to see how long it's going to take this to air dry in this type of situation where I have no actual airflow coming through this area. Because like I say, that's what will really make a difference. Is, you know, the amount of airflow, sunlight, how much solution you put on the surface. Now the other thing that I'm looking for as far as when this starts to dry out, I'm trying to see, can I physically see something, you know, a film or something on the countertop, and so far, you know, I can't see that. We're in the areas that it's drying. It looks like it's fine, because generally that's the case. If your solution dries slowly, think of it this way: when you mop a floor and you mop the floor and it's wet, but you put too much mopping solution on it, so it takes it a long time to dry. You generally will see this on wood floors or ceramic tile floors. Then it gets streaky, or you can see spots and stuff. That's generally because you put too much solution down and it took it way too long to dry. So, you know, are we going to end up with the same thing here? I don't think so. It doesn't appear to. I can see where this area of the counter is already dry. And I can't physically see anything that's to where there's marks or watermarks or things like that on the counter here. I don't see it. Same thing in the sink. I'm not seeing watermarks on the sink on the upper part here. The lower part's still a little wet, but I can't see any physical drops or watermarks or things like that there from my solution. And we're well, that's at 13 minutes into this. So So I think it's probably safe to say that that it's gonna dry without leaving watermarks on it. At least that's what it appears to be. You know, I'm gonna watch some of the heavier areas. You know, I've got some heavy solution areas here and over here. I'm going to really watch that to see if that is going to leave any watermarks, because it does appear like it might, because it was applied so much heavier than the other area here and in some of these areas. Yeah, so now we're you know, about 14 and a half minutes into this experiment to see you know, if our disinfectant would have the enough dwell time on the surface. And we still have some areas, small areas here that are wet. You can obviously see that I applied it heavier in some of these areas. Here's a little area here, but you're really starting to see it. It's really blotchy now to where you can see that it's actually drying out. So yeah, so we're at 15 minutes, and you know, it's all getting blotchy here. A couple of heavy spots here, and like I said, over here closer to the camera. But other than that, you know, I really don't see any watermarks, and it could be because of the texture of the countertop too, that there maybe it's harder to see. There, now we're approaching about 16 minutes, and yeah, it's still pretty blotchy in this area. But I would probably guess probably around 20 minutes it'll be totally evaporated. Again, you know, that's what I'm saying is that, you know, maybe I applied it too heavy, you know, with the spray bottle. And that very well could be. You know, I tried to just do a mist, and I stayed you know, two and a half feet above the countertop, and I just pulled the trigger, I think about 4 times as I moved it across the countertop to try to get an even application. Well, I think that's long enough, you know, for this experiment. I just wanted to show you this because, you know, really that's the thing. Is if we're disinfecting, we have to make sure that the disinfectant is staying wet on that surface long enough to meet the dwell times. So that's really what's important. So you know, hopefully you learned something from this, and hopefully that it gave you something to think about. So when you are doing your cleaning and your disinfecting at a home or office, think about the dwell time that disinfectant is going to be on the surface. So, you know, because if it doesn't meet the dwell time, then you have to adjust your application process. Maybe if you're spraying something on there or fogging, maybe you're going to have to move a little slower and adjust those dwell times. You know, so you're putting enough solution down to make sure that it lasts and stays wet 5 to 10 minutes. So hopefully you found this helpful, and I thought it gave us some good insight on you know, how fast a disinfectant will dry on a restroom countertop. And like I say, you know, I could have put it on heavier than the sprayers or foggers, you know, because those are just mist. That's all they are, and I tried to simulate that with this, but you know. Hopefully, who's ever doing that service, that they're watching for that and making sure that they are truly disinfecting and not just going in and spraying something and getting paid for it. So hopefully you found this helpful. If you did, you know, give us a thumbs up, give us a comment. What are your thoughts? I'd like to hear from you. Okay, So that's all I got. So until next time, we'll see you.